All right, so we're all ready to go. So welcome everybody this evening. This is the third of our artist talks for the semester, and it's turned out to be a really great way of having artists that we usually might not be able to get into the gallery. So we're hoping that in the future we will keep doing this, even though hopefully we'll go back to live at the art opening sometime soon. The way these talks always come about are the faculty bring suggestions to the gallery art committee, and that's how we come up with most of our speaking programs. So tonight's faculty member was Stacy Scheiwaller, and so with that, I'll introduce Stacy, and she'll introduce her artist tonight. So Stacy.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. We are really honored and privileged to have such a famous artist, such an influential artist, furniture maker, educator speak to us tonight. So we're just so lucky. Tonight's speaker is Wendy Moriyama. Furniture maker, artist, and educator, Wendy Moriyama has been making innovative work for 40 years. While her early work combined ideologies of feminism and traditional craft objects, her newer work moves beyond the boundaries of traditional studio craft and into the realm of social practice. Moriyama's work can be found in both national and international permanent museum collections, including the V&A in London, Dallas Museum of Art, Tennessee State Museum, Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Museum of Art and Design, New York, LACMA, the Mint Museum of Art, the Houston Museum of Art, the Fuller Craft Museum, the Mingei International Museum of San Diego, and the Oakland Museum of California nearby. Wendy Maruyama now works full-time in her studio, which is now located at Bread and Salt, an experimental center for the arts located in the barrio in San Diego. So we're so happy to welcome you, Wendy Maruyama, to speak to us tonight. Take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Stacey, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Dean and the School of Stanislas for inviting me to give a talk. So I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and start with the slideshow. And so I always like to start with this old childhood photo because it kind of expresses a lot of things about me. I was born in Colorado, but I grew up in a small farming community called Hemet, which is in Riverside County, I think. And I grew up in a neighborhood that was, I think we were the only Asian family in the whole town. And I also was born with a hearing disability and then also cerebral palsy. So you might have to bear with me in terms of my speech. And, so if you don't understand me, please write down in the chat if you have any questions or need clarification. So being deaf and having cerebral palsy and also being the only Oriental kid, Asian kid in the town, I think art seemed to be like a life-saving field for me because I was able to express myself by making artwork and being able to be really good at something when I wasn't very good at academics and other subjects. I went to San Diego State. We eventually moved to Chula Vista, which is another farming community right near the border. My father was a farmer, so, I'm very familiar with the whole farming community. And anyway, I decided to go to San Diego State and learn how to do woodworking. I was going to be an artist, and then I found out that they had a very good craft program, which had metalworking, ceramics, textiles, and I gravitated towards wood, not because I was a wood geek or I really loved tools, but I loved the idea that as a woman I could design furniture. Woodworking is characteristically a man's field. And at the time, there weren't very many women working in wood. And so I sort of saw that as a really challenging opportunity for me. So these are some examples of trays that I've made. So it kind of gives you an idea that I always like to push the boundaries of how things function and what they should look like. The piece on over here, can you see my pointer right here? Maybe not. The lower right was the salami tray, and you could just pile the salami on the tray and then just push it down the table to the next person, as a way of serving the food. This is my last piece that I made for graduate school. I eventually went to Rochester Institute of Technology for woodworking for my MFA because they also have a program for the deaf. And for once I qualified for a program because I was deaf enough to enter the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, which was part of RIT. And it was a government subsidized program, which was great because we really couldn't afford the kind of tuition that, the school charges. So this is a writing desk, and because it was a writing desk, I chose to write on it just to justify its function and its use. And the drawer front pivoted out. And, right now, this is no big deal, but 40 years ago, it was kind of a sacrilege to be drawing on a piece of furniture, writing on a piece of furniture. So it was kind of, frowned upon at one point. But it later became kind of famous, so I'm happy about that. After I graduated from RIT, I started to teach at the Appalachian Center for Crafts, which is in Tennessee. And this is one of the first pieces I made as a professional. This is called my Mickey Macintosh chair. It was kind of a mashup between Mickey Mouse and Charles Rennie Mackintosh, who was very famous for his kind of arts and crafts period car-back chairs. So I kind of hoped that maybe somebody could see the humor in something like this. I also went on to use a lot of paint in my work. At the time in 1980, most furniture people were using wood, and the color combinations were light brown, medium brown, and dark brown, which seemed kind of dull to me at the moment. So I started painting the work that I made. Kind of experimented with different patterns. At the time, there was this period called the pattern and decoration period, where people were really interested in pattern and color. This is a credenza. I'm trying to show a broad range of work that I've done over the last 30 years so that you could understand my background as a maker and how I went from this work to the later work that you will see later. This is a wall cabinet. One thing that I love about cabinets is that the inside doesn't necessarily have to look like the outside. I love the idea of being surprised when you open a cabinet. And in this case, you will see when you open the doors, you have a bank of drawers in the middle which are visible through cracks in the door. Okay. One of the things that really helped me to grow was applying for artist and residencies all over the world. I never thought that, being a little farm girl from Chula Vista would be able to travel all over the world, and all you have to do is apply. So I started applying, and I was very lucky to receive a number of residencies. This is the first one that I went to, which was in France. And France has a strong history of furniture, and it was a real rewarding period for me to be able to travel to Europe. And of course, my work also became inspired by the candelabras that you saw in the different cathedrals in France. There were all kinds of vanity tables that were in a lot of the chateaus that we visited. So I made my own little dressing table, which is called Ooh La La Vanity. This is a headboard, and my work started to become a little narrative. And one thing that I really love is sleeping, and I also love the elements of dreams, which often combine the past and the present, and then the not known future. So the flowers in this headboard represents the present. The dead flowers that you see in some of the windows represent the past. And then the little drawers and the empty windows represent the future, what's not known. So this is also a kind of a narrative piece. In the 90s, the whole dating game was such a pain in the neck, and I'm sure it still is for people who are still dating. And this is called Shut Up and Kiss Me. Just kind of just at the time, having so many, failed relationships of, dates that didn't turn out the way they were supposed to. Here is a photo of some furniture from the Cotswolds, which was the heartland of arts and crafts furniture. And I got a Fulbright to live there for 3 months and study the traditional furniture from that era. And this is some of the work that came out of that residency. This is a coffee bar. And I even had a British dog at the time. This is Dianza, and he was a trained hearing dog. So he used to let me know when my coffee was ready, and if the doorbell rang, or, he was really a great dog. But he matches my coffee bar pretty well. This is a wall cabinet using traditional British woods that I discovered. This is called English yew, and the outside is painted. I also finally went to Japan for the first time in '94, and that was probably the most scary place for me to go, because that's my ethnicity is Japanese American, and even though I was Japanese American. I was afraid that it was going to be difficult to travel in Japan because I didn't speak Japanese. And I felt, it's funny, it's kind of odd. I really felt like I was a total foreigner there, even though my facial identity is Japanese. I discovered that I was really an American when you really think about it. But one of the reasons why I went to Japan was because of the appreciation for craft and materials, and I was just really blown away by the kind of work that I saw in even the most ancient buildings. And of course, that experience changed my own color palette. As you can see from the previous pictures, these pieces became a lot more muted and less bright, but very much inspired by the colors that I saw in Japan. This is the cabinet, and this is 2 pictures showing the left and the right side being opened, and there's a mirror in the middle. This, based on that design, I received a commission to do a couple of benches for the UC San Francisco Medical School. And this is probably my first and maybe my last public art project. It's made out of steel, stainless steel, and cast concrete. Again, being inspired by my trip to Japan, I was also thinking about the contemporary aspects of Japan, and so I wanted to make my own tea house, which is based on a traditional 4.5 mat tea house, but I wanted to imbue it with more contemporary images of Japan, things that we tend to, connect Japan with, like Godzilla and Hello Kitty. So this is probably the largest piece I've ever made. It's basically like a piece of furniture, but it's just much bigger. And this is the exterior, which was, left to be more traditional. And these are the details. I also went to China, and I was doing some research on Chinese furniture. Chinese furniture is pretty incredible. They really, in Japan doesn't have a history of furniture like China does. And so it's really important for me to see the patterns and the surfaces of some of the buildings. This is from the Forbidden City in Beijing. And so I made this vanity that was inspired by a traditional Chinese vanity. At the same time, I was thinking quite a bit about my own identity as an Asian female, and also the perceptions that people have about Asian women. And, are we supposed to be subservient? Are we supposed to be dragon ladies? Are we, there's all kinds of stereotypes about Asian women. So this is my sister, and she is an actress from Los Angeles. In fact, she teaches improv at the Groundlings Theater in LA, and she's been in a couple of movies. One of them called The Campaign, and she had a small part in Pulp Fiction years ago. So basically the video, she keeps on putting on more and more makeup and making her eyes look more and more kind of Asian. And I'm gonna fast forward the video so that you can see what she's trying to do in terms of personifying Asian woman. Okay, so the Kandashi series was based on the hair combs that the geisha women wear. And these are actually like the normal combs are only like a few inches, but I sort of saw these as figurative pieces. I'm 5 feet tall, so all of these pieces are 5 feet tall, and I sort of saw them as stylized figures. Here's another one, and then a detail of the comb detail. Each comb tooth has been carved by hand before the whole thing was glued up. Here's another one that's not 5 feet tall, but it's about 4 feet wide and about 36 inches high. And here's a close-up showing you the detail of the teeth. And in between the teeth, I took newspaper, Chinese or Japanese newspaper, and glued it between the tines. In 2008, I got a residency to work in New York City for 3 months. And so I wanted to study more about Executive Order 906, which was when the Japanese Americans were forced out of their homes in 1942 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. My mother was in Los Angeles when this happened, and so her family was forced out of their home in California near Los Angeles. And as you can see from this map, everybody on the west side of that dark line that's along on the east side of the western states, they all had to move out of the premises by a certain date. Now, a lot of people didn't know where to go, so they established what they called camps, but we call them incarceration camps, concentration camps, if you will, or the triangular shape that you see on the map were the main incarceration camps for Japanese Americans had to go in during the evacuation. And then Japanese businesses had to sell things like really quickly, and a lot of people just got really ripped off, including my grandfather. Basically sold everything for hardly nothing. Anyway, and some Japanese Americans were repatriated to Japan, even though they had never been to Japan, a lot of them, and they didn't even speak Japanese, which is really crazy. And this is what most of the incarceration camps looked like. They were in desolate parts of the country with very harsh winters and very horrible summers. So I made a series of pieces that were inspired isn't the right word, but I wanted my work to kind of educate the public about what happened. I'm very shocked to find that a lot of people have never heard of this Executive Order 906. I wasn't taught about it when I was in junior high or high school. A lot of grown people from the Midwest had never heard of it. So I felt like it was my mission to do a series of work that would basically talk about this period in American history. This is another cabinet. My grandmother had a nervous breakdown, and she ended up breaking or burning all of the possessions. So this piece is a little bit about her, and all the doors go, normally in a sliding cabinet, the doors are parallel. But in this particular piece, the doors go at angles, which cause them to collide with each other. And to me, that was like a representative of the family discord and just not fitting into a new environment. One of the things that was kind of a positive element in a very dire situation was the fact that Japanese Americans made things while they were imprisoned in the camp. And one of the things that they made were these tiny little hand-carved and hand-painted birds that were made into pins. And what they would do is they would get the National Geographic magazine to look for pictures of birds and animals and make little pins out of the scrapwood that they would find in and around the camp. So this was an extra pin from one of the camps that I made into this piece. But one of the icons of the Executive Order 906 were photos by Dorothea Long, who was very sympathetic to the Japanese Americans, and she tried to portray the emotional hardship that these people endured. And so you notice that they're all wearing tags, which was to identify them. Each family had a number assigned to them, and they had a camp that they had to go to when they were evacuated. So I decided that I wanted to replicate every single tag of every Japanese American that was sent to these places. And that was a total of 120,000 tags for 10 different prisons. And this was a 4-year project that involved volunteers of all kinds. I went to high schools, I went to temples, I went to churches, I went to senior homes. I bribed my students with pizza. I would do anything to get the tags made. And so this is the installation for one of the first shows that this work was at, which was in Arkansas. And you can see some of the cabinet work displayed with the tags, and some of the things that you see in the vitrines were things that were made by the Japanese Americans in the camp.
Wendy, it looks like your slideshow is not advancing.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to see what you said. Hold on 1 second. What?
Your slides are not.
Oh, it's not advancing? Oh, really? Let's see. Where are you now?
We're still on the first piece with the walls that were the sliding that would collide.
Oh. Okay, well, let me go back there and see if going there will help. I wonder, this has never happened before. Oh, okay, hold on. For some reason, do you see anything now? Hold on just 1 second here. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that was happening. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Can you see that now? Is it advancing?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want me to back up to this piece then? Anyway, this what I was saying about the things that were made by hand in the camps. That was one of the positive things that I saw about how the Japanese Americans were able to make their life a little more bearable by making things with their hands, and kind of brings it back to my interest in making things by hand and the kind of solace and peace that I get from making these objects. And then the tags were, this is a photograph by Dorothea Long, and her Machida families wearing tags that indicate the number. Each family was assigned a number, and then they were told where to go for the camp. And in a way, the tags became kind of emblematic of Executive Order 906, kind of like the yellow stars that we saw that the Jews had to wear in Germany and in other camps. So this is the finished installation of all those tags. There was 120,000 people that were imprisoned, and so the government has a record of each name and number, and so I decided to recreate each of the tags for each individual, for each of the 10 camps that were there. And this, of course, required a lot of volunteers, churches, temples, kids, students, anything I could do to get them to help with the tags. And it took about 4 years to do them all. The vitrines that you see on the right had pieces that were made by the prisoners in the camp. The wildlife project was the next project that most of you know. Elephants were being massacred for the ivory. Rhinoceros were being obliterated for the horns, due to satisfy the greed and the demand in China. And so I did a series of work commemorating and educating the problems of wildlife poaching. And I worked at Pier Truck for a month with a couple of artists who helped me make a lot of these tucks out of glass. This is called the Sarcophagus. A lot of the pieces in the show were based on different memorials from different cultures, and the sarcophagus is one of those where you see the dead Pope laying under glass. This was based on a Buddhist shrine, and the wood came from an old rifle company that went out of business. And so I reused the wood that was meant for the rifles and made it into this shrine, which is based on the Buddhist shrine that you often see in the home, honoring the dead. The I just wanted to share this information about the layout of the shrine. The flowers need to be there. The candle represents unchanging truth. The bell is used to call the dead. This bell rings every 15 minutes, which is when an elephant is killed in Africa. And this is what a senator wasn't supposed to have done. The cenotaph was based on, it's usually a shrine for a body that is not there. So instead of a body, there's a video embedded between 12 inches of glass, and the whole base is made out of steel, and you've got flowers. And if you see the video in its entirety, at the very end, you see a dying rhino with their horns cut off. You know, I'm a little gruesome, but I feel like people need to know the horrors of poaching. So I also made a series of elephant heads, and this is in my studio just to show you the process of how I work with this. And this is the elephant when they've hung on the wall. And I did not use the computer. I kind of did everything in an analog manner, basically using cardboard to make a pattern. And then I would adjust the cardboard and remake it. And finally, after about 3 mock-ups, I came up with this form. And this is a close-up of, what was really cathartic for me was being able to sit there and stitch these pieces together. There's like this metaphor of trying to repair or solve a problem. I went to Cambodia, and I don't know if you guys know about the pangolin, but the pangolin is one of the most endangered animals. They are being killed for their meat and their scales. So I made this pangolin out of rattan, and several traditional rattan workers from Cambodia assist me with this project. And then we went to an event where the public was invited to make the scales for the animal. So it was a whole ritual of being able to replace and put the scales back on to this animal. And it was also to educate the public, because they see pangolins running wild in their country and just wanted to teach them to leave these lovely creatures alone. This is the finished product. And then after doing that work, I needed to do something that was a little lighter and not so serious. So I did some pieces that were inspired by Annie Albert's work, who is a textile designer from the Black Mountain School. And these are wall pieces made out of wood. I'll go through this kind of quickly. We're probably running out of time, huh? So I'm almost done. So these are I had fun making these. Okay, so now I'm getting serious again. These pieces were made last year and this year, and this is my pandemic piece. I've always been interested in Black mirrors, and for a number of reasons. It's in some cases like this is a black lacquer mirror, and in Japan in the old days, the Asian geisha used black lacquer for mirrors because the black lacquer diminished the wrinkles on their faces. And I could really relate to that, since I'm almost 70 and I'm getting a lot of wrinkles. And so, wouldn't mind having a couple of black mirrors. But the mirror also, to me, it's the reflection. It's maybe a moment of just thinking about past or the future. It also has a sense of depth. It can be like a deep mirror in a way. Last year, one of my aunts, actually a couple of my relatives have been diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's. So this was a piece that was done in collaboration with a Salk Institute scientist whose area of study was Alzheimer's research. And so we talked a little bit about his research, and I made this piece, which is a black mirror. At the far left, the mirror is totally flat and very clear when you look into it. But as you move to the right, it becomes more and more distorted as you go along. So here's a door that really doesn't do anything. It only moves a couple of inches. I think, the confusion of how things work or don't work when you have Alzheimer's. And this is the far right side of the mirror, which is it's like a carnival mirror in a way. And that's, for the person with Alzheimer's memory becomes very distorted. They remember things in the past like it was yesterday, but they can't remember what happened 15 minutes ago. So, sorry. This is my last piece, which I just finished last week, as a matter of fact. And it's just a plain shelf, and it's painted on the back. It's called Still Life. In other words, still, the person is still alive and still has life. And that's it.